With the infrastructure sprawl that has been accelerated by the pandemic, many companies are flying blind without the necessary visibility into their assets. Over the past few years, one company has emerged and grown to be a dominant player. Today, we're going to talk to the big dog in the monitoring space, Datadog. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to another Future Tech video podcast. The audio version of the podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most of the others, or you can find it at futr.buzzsprout.com. Today, we are going to be talking about monitoring and the critical nature of visibility. In my days on the customer side, I knew how invaluable this information was to keep the business stable and running. And we are very fortunate to have with us Ilan Rabinovitch, VP of Product and Community at Datadog, and a prominent figure in the Linux community, to tell us how the magic works at Datadog and how they became such a dominant player in such a short time. Welcome, Ilan.
Thanks for having me, Chris and Sintesh.
So tell me a little bit about, what the history of Datadog is. Where did you guys come from? What was the problem that, you set out to solve?
Sure. So I think, the initial premise of Datadog came from our two co-founders, Olivia and Alexei. They were both, they were running operations and product engineering at various at a startup that they were working at together in the education space. And while they'd known each other, going back through college, and they were great friends, and they each liked their teams very well, and they found everybody to be collaborative within their silos. What they found was that across the silos, people just weren't getting along. And it wasn't that anybody was, they weren't necessarily hiring assholes on both sides that didn't want to get along, pardon my language, but the reality was, it turns out if you have your incentives misaligned, if you're looking at the wrong data, if you're looking at the wrong, you're looking at different data, it's easy for you and I to argue about, to have different opinions on outcomes when the facts that we're starting from are just completely distinct. Yeah. And so they went back and looked at what their teams were doing. And the reality was that the product development teams were looking at a certain set of metrics, and the operational teams were looking at this, maybe the same metrics, but in different tools. And then, one says, well, gravity makes things goes up. Another one says, well, gravity makes things goes down. And the outcome of that is well, the memory leak's your fault, Chris, not mine. You did this thing. And you say, well, no, there's no leak in my code. You're just operating it wrong. And so then you end up fighting about opinions, not about facts that then you could find solutions towards. And so they came together and tried to build tried to build a platform that helps break down those silos, helps teams on both sides of the divide look at the same data, so they can look at the problem as the enemy rather than each other, right? It's not you woke me up. It's not I took your site down. It's, hey, something didn't happen. Something broke. Here is what that thing is. Here's all the symptoms around it. How do we find a solution together? And so that was, turns out 2010, as they were working, as Datadog was launching, was also pretty seminal moment in the whole DevOps movement of, break down organizational silos. And so the two work together quite well. And that brought a resurgence in interest in observability and in monitoring. The exciting thing here is that those are just two silos in all our organizations. And so there's many, many more silos that we can talk about, right? This year and last year, sort of the hot term is DevSecOps, right? Okay, well, you got to bring security into this DevOps conversation. Well, great. That's that's one of many more teams. Next is, what about QA? What about business? What about product managers? What about, what about every other organization, part of your organization that needs to be working together to be successful? Compliance, et cetera. And so the mission here at Datadog is to build tools and build a platform that helps all of that collaboration take place, all of that data sharing take place. And then each of the products that you've seen us bring out over the years, starting off with our infrastructure monitoring tool that helps you understand the health of your systems and the processes running on them. Our APM tool that helps you understand the performance of your code and tracing that code, profiling that code, understanding how it interacts with other services and backends. And our security products, and these are all different views on a lot of the same data and different workflows on a lot of the same data. And the idea is to help all of these teams be collaborative rather than antagonistic.
Yeah, I wish you could extend that to the larger world. I mean, that sounds exactly like what we need.
Yeah, I think we'll stay out of the realm of politics, but for all things, all things digital, I think we're in a good spot to help.
Well, there's certainly a lot of politics in the enterprise, and I've seen that go down myself. And having the ability to identify a problem without the finger pointing is so critical, because that happens so much, and it's such an impediment to the time to resolution for issues.
And I think it's human nature, right? You don't want to be. It's human nature that you don't want whatever the failure was, whatever the problem was, you don't want that to be seen as your fault. And so you maybe. But the reality is, like, if we all look at this as a way to work together, and I don't mean that just like in kumbaya sort of way, like we're all here to we're here to run a business, right? The only reason Datadog's only successful if our customers can monitor the systems they need to monitor and get the business insights they need. You guys are only successful if people, if when we record the podcast, it gets edited, it gets posted, it gets promoted, so people can watch it, right? And so we have to think about all of the things we do in that context. It's not just, did my commit hit the main branch in source control, or did my code hit a server? It's like, well, could a user actually use it? Could they actually pay us money for it? Could our accounting team actually collect, the bill for them using it? Like, all of those things matter for a business to run. Yeah. And that's where the collaboration comes in.
So, with the pandemic, we've seen this just infrastructure sprawl, right? I mean, one, you got people working from home from everywhere, but I think it drove a lot of acceleration of next-gen IT. So we see a lot of people moving to the cloud at a pace that they've never done so before, adopting a lot of SaaS-based applications. So the footprint of a company's infrastructure is just so much broader now. And I think people have lost sight of what everything is doing. And I think that, having that kind of visibility is really important. I mean, can you speak to, what you guys are doing in that front to kind of bring it all together?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll tell a little bit of a story from earlier in my career, and then I think that'll help connect the dots.
Yeah.
I was working at an early web startup in Southern California. We did pricing of cars and helped you buy cars online. And so this is, we were going through this microservices sprawl, and every engineer woke up every day and they're like, I need a new server for my new service. And I was like, that's great. Like, you call up Dell and you swipe your credit card and servers show up and racks get deployed at data centers and power gets hooked up. And, 3 to 6 months later, the engineer can run their service, and it's great. And at some point we're having to push back on them. And I'm saying, like, hey, we don't have enough space for the servers that you want to do the thing that you want to do. We need to look at virtualization. We need to look at consolidation. We need to look at, all of these different things. And they're like, what are you talking about? We don't have that many services. So I took them on a field trip down to the data center, and I walked them through the rows of racks that went into doing what they did, because this was, virtualization was popular then, but it's not like today, where everything, we didn't have the same tools that we have today. We didn't have cloud providers. We didn't have all these things.
Right.
And they looked at it and they're like, it takes this much hardware to run our website. What is and it gave them this realization of, okay, this is tangible to me now. I understand I have to rethink the way I'm doing it. And some of that was operational tooling, some of that was product development and architecture tooling, but that making things tangible in that way gave them a realization of how this manifests in the world when from commit to production. And I think you lose that when you go to the cloud, right? Because the first thing you do is, I guess pun intended, the cloud is a nebulous thing. You don't get to see it. I can't take you on a field trip to AWS's, US East 1. I can't take you to US West 2. Yeah. And so you need but understanding how all these pieces to fit together is important. And so one of the things that we have with a lot of our customers as they're migrating is what we hear is like, I was running this thing in my data center, or I was in cloud provider A and I want to move to cloud provider B, or I was in my data center and I want to move it to a cloud provider. And they have a challenge with sort of reconciling whether they're done or not. because like, yes, the code got deployed and it seems like it works, but will it perform the same way as everything are all of the things I had in my data center now in the cloud? Or, do I have a cross cloud dependency? Do I have a cross data center dependency? What's going on here? And this is where, tools like Datadog do a very good job of helping you take that intangible and make it tangible. And so you're able to get an inventory of all the things that you have. We have tools like our service map from our APM offering that help you understand, well, that, when you click that login button, it actually depended on these 5 services behind the scenes, and this is how they all connected. When you're running your tests to try to see performance before a cutover, you can look and say, well, this ran more efficiently in my data center than it does in the cloud, or the other way around. And you can reason about whether or not the move to the cloud was the right idea, or between cloud providers, or did you pick the right instance types? And all of these things fit together to make it real, to help you define success. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know if you haven't defined what success looks like, you don't know if you've been successful. Right. And I think that's where Datadog provides a ton of help in this world. The other piece is a lot of the tools that folks were using pre-cloud didn't think about, and pre-virtualization, didn't think about pre-containers, didn't think about the dynamic nature of this all. In my first IT job, like, you got assigned, you came in and you spun up a server. That server was, if you were at that company for 3-4 years, that server was probably still there, right? Like, it was 3 years of depreciation and planning and accounting before, maybe your leases with Dell or HP ran out and then you replaced it with something else, but things didn't move. Even at like the largest of scales, like, things stayed around forever. Now we're talking about containers that hang around for seconds or minutes at a time. You need tools that can learn to move and shake with that. And that's that's another piece where Datadog comes in, is that we're able to, we focus on those dynamic environments.
Yeah. I think, in my time, on the customer side, one of the things that I always found was so challenging about this space, about monitoring and analytics and things like that, was that they were so critically needed in the organization, but communicating that value proposition up the food chain. And I think you kind of alluded to this when you talked about, walking, the folks through the data center. Communicating that value proposition can get really tough, because it's like, this doesn't necessarily have top line value. It can prevent issues, and it can make you, turn you from a reactive company to a proactive company. Right. But, those are terms that sometimes get lost when, trying to sell this upstream. Right. What are the things that you see people do to really just communicate that value?
So I think, as all of our businesses become more digital, I mean, I think that proactive versus reactive stance is a huge piece of it, right? Whether it's, whether it's all rushing to an on sale for a ticket to for the video game system of your choice, or, as they're all running out, or we're all crowding the vaccine websites this year, I think is probably the more timely analysis.
Yeah.
Those outages, maybe they have both top line and bottom line impact, right? When somebody can't purchase your stuff, like, yes, you lost a sale today, so you can't, you can't recover that. But there's been studies that show that stability and reliability have lasting impacts on whether or not customers ever come back. It's not just you couldn't load the website today, and you're like, okay, well, whatever, I'll buy that thing later. It's people just often don't come back if they find the services they're interacting with are not performant and not reliable. It also has branding impact, right? And so if you talk to CFOs at the largest organizations, they actually will tell you, Amazon has done this analysis of, like, 1 second of downtime costs us this many dollars, not just today, but for the foreseeable future with that customer, or that cohort of customers. And so I think that's a huge selling point for organizations that are trying to decide whether to be proactive or reactive to things.
Yeah, and I think I think you make a really good point. I think there is a lot of data out there, and I think that people have to get effective at communicating that data to really make it go. But I think another piece of it is a company like Datadog, that has such a recognition in the market and such visibility, and and we're seeing how pervasive it's becoming across a lot of companies. I think that also gives validity to the space as well. And I think you guys have done a really good job of sort of elevating that conversation about yourself and what you do. So tell me, I mean, Datadog started off as sort of infrastructure monitoring and management, and you've when you look at capabilities you guys have integrated lately, I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, you've got security and all sorts of things kind of wrapped up in this. Tell me, like, where you saw the kind of critical components to putting together the monitoring platform, right? What were the things that we have to highlight these things and we have to nail these things and get them really good, because that's what's so critical.
So I think there's foundational pieces, and I think there's I think the foundational pieces here are one is being able to be service focused and customer focused rather than necessarily server focused, right? We talked about how these containers, these hosts, these pieces in the cloud are moving at breakneck speed. And so there's that. And so I think that was a key foundation for what we did early on. But also from a user perspective, just making this be, making the tool be, making the tools that we build be a delightful experience that folks in all corners of the organization are willing to use is what's really important to that collaboration component we talked about earlier. We need to make it easy for them to share with each other. We need to make it easy for them to ramp up and get into the product, into the platform very quickly. And we need to make we need to make it very intuitive. And so I think those are sort of two foundational aspects of what we did, and I think maybe didn't exist in past incarnations of observability platforms, and so beyond that, you need to be able to get to all the data that you want. So we have to build tracing tools and libraries that let you talk in all the different languages. We need to build integrations that let you connect data, pull in data from all the different sources. But at the end of the day, if we can't move at the speed and at the scale of all of these things that are moving around, and if users can't interact with it in an intuitive way that lets them get up and running really quickly, they go back to other tools or other methodologies that are in their muscle memory. And then you're back to each silo doing things in their own way. I do it in Excel. You do it in, you do it with your grep and awk commands if you're a Unix person. Somebody else does it, with a bunch of Python code. And then how do you bring it all together? How do we all look at the same stuff? Because this, none of the data lines up, none of the terms line up. And so being able to get to a point where we've built those collaborative interactions and those intuitive interactions, I think is key.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mention that, because I remember being in a Fortune 500 enterprise, and dealing with the monitoring side of things, and it always seemed like we had a commercial piece of software doing it and backing it up with some open source tool. So we always had those competing tools, because it never felt like we got the full visibility from any one thing, and right. It just made it harder. I mean, it was good in the sense that we got better information, but it was challenging because we're having to maintain a lot of stuff. And
that muscle memory is real, right? You need to, the tools need, when you're in a fire and you go to pick the tool of your choice, maybe you needed a hammer instead of a screwdriver, but you're really used to using that screwdriver. So, or the other way around. So that's what you'll pick, because you pick the tools the tools that you have that comfort with. And so, building the ergonomics that are right for customers is huge.
Yeah. And I think, the thing that's cool about Datadog, I think, is that I think a lot of companies don't appreciate the importance of good UX with their products, and we get these great products sometimes that just the visual interface and the way you interact with it is so poor that you can't really extract the value of it, because it just is, it's hard to easily understand and grasp. And I think you guys have put a lot of effort into that side of the equation, which I think is cool. And I personally appreciate that. And I think even people who aren't, maybe, sensitive to design things and things like that, they still get it, even though they don't get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And I think, That user experience is, I think, brought us a long way in focusing on that, right? You mentioned that we have 5, 10, we have many more products than we did back in 2010 when we launched, right?
Yeah.
We have, at that point we had our infrastructure offering. Now we have, a dozen different products covering everything from availability to security to user experience. I think there's lots of companies out there that try to check each one of those boxes, and maybe they go on an acquisition tear and buy 10 different companies, but they very rarely integrate them all in a way that makes it very easy to flip between each of these different pieces. And I think that's the true, that's one of the pieces that excites me so much about the Datadog platform is just this the commonality between all the tools that we have, making it easy to flip from, our RUM offering that lets where users are running into errors or high latency from in your browser, how come this page took so long to load, to our backend systems with tracing and APM, which let you say, oh, it's because this server was slow. And they're like, okay, well, why was the server slow? Well, the database behind it, the queries on it were bad, or the index was wrong, or whatever it might be. And being able to drive that thread through all these different components rather than having to bring up 10 different tools has been key in helping our customers accelerate their time to detection and their time to resolution.
Yeah, I think, you bring up a really interesting point. So many companies grow through acquisitions, right? And they try to slap all these different products together, but there's that level of integration is always lacking. And I think, the other side of that equation is you see so many companies out there that are really more of a feature rather than a whole platform. And, it's hard you can't have 10, companies that are just a feature. And the fact that you kind of, organically, built all this, I think, is a real value.
I don't want to pretend like we don't also grow through acquisitions, right? We've had a number of acquisitions we've announced over the years from our logging product that started with an acquisition of a company, Logmatic, and more recently there's been some others in the news that we can discuss after they maybe come back and discuss after they close in the security space. But sure. The gist is, I think, is less about I don't think this is acquisitions are bad and you should build and not buy. Yeah. What it is that you need as a product organization, as a design organization, is to think about how do it's not. The sum has to be greater. The outcome has to be greater than the sum of the parts, right? Yeah. And so you can't just say well, I bought this thing, let me check it off. That thing has to fit into everything else and be and be an accelerator for every other piece you have, right? Right. So, and I think that's a lot of that's a lot of the way Datadog has thought about it. And hopefully you and our users are seeing the same outcomes.
Yes. So tell me a little bit about what is your sweet spot in the market? I mean, where do you see you're just the key use cases where you just kind of knock it out of the park, or maybe even some of the key markets where you're just really killing it in those markets?
Yeah, I think the big thing is you don't change things that aren't broken. So you don't try to fix things that aren't broken. And so I think that one of the huge drivers for us over the years has been this migration to the cloud and migration to dynamic environments. There's been once folks do that, they find themselves in a need to understand where things are going, where they're coming from, how they're performing, right? And that's it. Once they're in that spot of moving from on-prem to the cloud, or moving from basic cloud to containers as they try to supercharge, their development platforms with Kubernetes and the like. Those are things that drive a clear need for observability, and Datadog ends up in there. At the same time as, we talked about security and compliance and their teams earlier, right? Those teams also struggle with these moves. It's not just like these are new technologies that your product engineers or infrastructure engineers maybe struggle with understanding how they fit together or how they're impacting your performance or availability. Those security and compliance teams are also having to learn the same thing, and their tools, their tools and their methodologies from the past don't work as well anymore. Yeah. It used to be when you go to launch a service, you do this, if you launch a new service once a year or once every couple of years, well, great. You can meet with your security team and sit down, and those boundaries don't change all that often. when you're launching a new service a week, because everything's a microservice now and every engineer needs at least 5 services to their name, like that becomes a much more difficult conversation for security to stay around, right? And so we need to give them the same visibility in these tools there as well. And so they come to us and look for that as well, whether it's with our SIEM offering and our compliance solutions that we're building, or honestly just the data that they get around how everything interacts from APM. They get this very clear map that helps them understand how all different services interact and why. And then they can come back and they can reason about, well, okay, this has access to user data here, this has access to from the internet there. Let's connect the dots. But without that visibility, all of these teams sort of, they flounder a bit trying to figure out what's next and what's up, what's down.
Yeah, so I don't go to shows anymore.
Turns out none of us do.
Yeah, which kind of sucks. But I got to say, back in the day when I did, the first booth I always saw was the Datadog booth. You guys were always right at the entrance of every show, and I think you guys did a really great job of branding and marketing and elevating your presence in the market. And you did it in such a short time. You kind of became this really big player in to me, maybe to you, because you lived it. It didn't seem like such a short time, but from an outside observer's perspective, you kind of became this big player in a really short time. And tell me what kind of went into that. And I think everybody looks like they're having a great time out there too. So what's going on there?
So I think one of the key tenets of a lot of our marketing and our approach with customers has always been, use every interaction as an opportunity to educate. And I don't mean that in the sense of like, I know better than you and any of you about your business, about your tech stack. The reality is, you know your environment better in every possible way than I do. But if we're talking about containers, regardless of if you're using Datadog, there's some common pieces around containers we can all talk about. And we can put together content either for the booth or for our website that educates you all about this space. And I think that, that drives that engagement model where it's not just about, let me scan you real quick, Chris, and somebody will call you later, but rather let me share something with you that's of value, whether or not you end up becoming a Datadog customer. Brings people, continues to bring people back. And so, if you look at our blog, like our blog that we call the Monitor, or the resources that we put out there or elsewhere, we spend, I have a huge team that all they do every day is just think about technologies that our customers care about, and then help educate around how do you operate Docker? How do you operate Kubernetes? How do you operate, Redis or Cassandra or Nginx or these different pieces, and how do they interact with each other? And then, we build in-depth content about all of that and training about all of that, so that you think about us as your, as a resource of where to learn those things. Now, at the end, I'm definitely going to tell you, all of these things I just taught you, you can do them all with one click with Datadog. And there is a call to action. Don't get me wrong, and there has to be a business case behind all of it. But I think making every one of those interactions also be something that provides value to the person you're interacting with, is key to maintaining that relationship and that branding, and that drives growth and trust.
So, on that topic, Ilan, how would you describe the culture of Datadog? It sounds like you started there in 2015, so you're coming up on 6 years or so.
Yep.
So, give me a little sense of what was it like then, and how is it now? How would you describe it?
So I don't think I would say the number one thing I would say is user focused and user obsessed, and that's a little bit cliche. Every customer, every company says that they're very user focused and user driven, but I've experienced this from both sides. Before joining Datadog, I was at a video delivery analyst company in the Bay Area, Uyala. They're now they've now been through a few acquisitions and transitions since, but I was a Datadog customer there for a number of years, and I saw firsthand that every time, as I brought, as we were doing our own migrations and transformations at Uyala, and brought Datadog in to help to accelerate that, there were needs I had that were not, that were maybe not there. Every piece, every platform, every product you have, you always have feature requests, you always have problems you want to do, that you want it to solve, and maybe maybe they're not there yet. And so, Datadog did a lot for us and helped me build a culture of observability within my organization. But when there were gaps, everybody from the line level engineer that I might have interacted with in a support ticket to random people I met at conference booths to the CTO and CEO and chief product officer, they cared about that end to end, and they were obsessed with making sure that when we had feedback, it was heard and it was delivered on. And I remember, I think it was the second reInvent I'd ever gone to, AWS's mega conference in Vegas that when mega conferences existed. I remember, walking up to the Datadog booth, having been a customer for a little bit, and walk up and I'm, getting a demo from somebody, and they look down at my badge and they go, "I know you. You filed a support ticket 2 weeks ago for this feature request." I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." And he says, "I have a commit on my laptop ready to go to fix it for you. I've been working on it. Give me till reInvent's over, but you'll have it." Right. and that's when I did my time at Uyala and came to Datadog, and I saw the other side of that, which is firsthand, firsthand driving that user obsession throughout the entire organization. So I think that's a key part of our DNA. I also, there's just a level of, I think that, a lot of I've seen organizations out there that, maybe they're user obsessed, but they're also, it also feels like sometimes they're talking down to you, like, you need to learn how to do it our way. And I think the other aspect of Datadog culture that I value quite a bit is, how humble everybody is, and understanding that, our way is our way. It's not necessarily the better way. We need to fit ergonomically into how you think as a customer and how you think as an organization. We can't expect you to change everything about yourselves to fit our mold. We have to fit into your mold. And so those two pieces together, I think, are huge in driving development of products that customers love.
Yeah, what a concept, right? Looking out for the customer, and actually trying to solve the customer's problems. And and that's where a lot of companies actually do get lost is, they're so caught up on doing what they want to do that they've lost sight of if the customer even has that problem, and so to actually focus on the problem and then develop solutions for it, I think that's a great strategy. I mean, obviously it's been working for you guys. You guys are growing like crazy. So in that vein, how do you guys sell? Who is the key person in an IT organization or the company that you want to target? Because you're going across so many different domains. It seems like you have to sell so many people along in that chain. So, from a salesperson's perspective, what's the key to success?
It depends on the organization you're working with and you're targeting, right? And so, historically, when Datadog started, we were very bottom up, right? The focus was make it so easy that you don't need the professional services, make it so easy that, an engineer can swipe their credit card, get up and running and get started. And that's where, we have many, many large customers today that started off from that, in 2010, 2012 era, just swipe a card off to the races or maybe not swipe, physically type into your computer, but you get the point. And so I think that focusing, starting off there really drove the user experience and the time to value conversation, right? Because if you're selling to developers, they're eager in seeing results right away, right? They're used to write some code, run the code, see the output, you're done, right? And so they want that
instant gratification,
quick time to value, depending on if you're on the engineering side or on the sales side. And so that's huge for them. And so we've continued to focus on that. And so when you're selling to them, that's what you focus on. You focus on those education pieces that I talked about earlier. You focus on tooling that makes them help them be successful and happy. But that's only one side of the equation, right? Datadog doesn't only sell to those engineers who have to love it. We also have to sell to, the CIOs and the CTOs and the and the VPs that are, they've been given a business initiative with very clear objectives of reduce our operating costs and, move to the cloud or improve our agility so we can deliver products faster, through these various pieces. And so that we have to come to them with very clear solutions as well. So it depends on who you have to target your message toward, depending on who you're targeting. Now, you can't do one or the other, because if the CIO shows up and says, Chris, you must buy Datadog, and you're like, I wasn't part of this decision. It doesn't meet my needs. You look at it begrudgingly. On the other hand, if I build if I build tools and solutions and things that help drive the conversation of both what you care about and what your leader cares about, well, then you both meet in the middle and you say, I must have this, and that's how we try to approach it.
There's always you have to be able to give everybody at the table something that they want, because if you don't, there's always that one person who can kill the deal, right? So you have to really stay focused on what's the broader need for everybody. Mm. So I love the fact that you said you came from the customer side. That's always interesting when we see people who come from the customer side, because they love the company. And I love the fact that you guys have this sort of land and expand sort of strategy where the barriers to entry are very low. So with all that, where are you guys going with everything? What's next? What are the big key challenges in the market that you guys see that that these are the problems that we are going to be really good at solving?
So I think, I think the next, we've sort of hinted this a bit with some of the recent news and from with Datadog, but security is a huge space of investment for us right now. Both on for many of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, either from a compliance standpoint, we want to help where we want to help teams come to their security, product engineers come to their security teams and their compliance teams, and they say, I want to do X, and we want to be able to help we want to help those security teams and those compliance teams be able to say yes. There's having led security teams, it's very easy to be in a spot for your team to quickly fall into being the team of no. Mm-hmm. Yes. And being the team of no doesn't get you anywhere. Just like being the team of no for operations didn't work, pre-DevOps, right? You can't be seen as impeding business and impeding the success of the organization. You have to find a way to reframe the conversation in the same way, reframe the conversation as a yes, here is how we get there, not no, you can't do this, right? And so, I think what you'll see is continued investment in that side of that side of the house from our from our platform on how do we help security teams, compliance teams, become a bigger part of the conversation and feel more enabled to provide that security guidance to their colleagues in the development and operations space and the rest of the business. Every one of we look at things like, the SolarWinds breach and the wider breaches that have happened as part of that. You look at any of the security stories, like nobody wants to be on the front page of Krebs's blog or in the New York Times as the latest company with a breach. And so as we move everything more, to more our businesses to more digital first approaches, all of these things are connected. And it's very easy to be that one person that left an S3 bucket open to the world. And it's like, oh, there's my credit card data. Or forgot to upgrade struts, as in the case of a library of some sort that you forgot you even used in some deep in the bowels of your application, like one of the credit reporting agencies did, and now you're in a spot where where you missed that. So I think what you'll see is more investment there, right? And hints to that are things like the launch of a lot of the launches of the lineups that we had at Dash, in 2020 were around. Security and compliance offerings. We launched back in October a partnership with Sneak, another dog, another company with a dog mascot, where we're helping to bring their vulnerability data alongside organizations' operational data. So when you don't just hear, there's a couple of libraries in this container image, you might want to update it. This is the traffic that comes in, and these are the methods that get hit that are vulnerable to that. And we can directly show you in production like what services are worth investigating more to. So you'll see I think you'll see a ton of investment there because we have to get out of this mindset of the most secure application is one that's not connected to the internet. We're all on the internet. All of our customers need to be able to interact with their stuff, but they also expect us to keep their data private and their data secure. And so there's that. I also think there's the next silo beyond security is the business, right? There's just too much of a disconnect, I think, today between in many organizations. The organizations that do it right don't have this disconnect, but in many organizations, there's a disconnect between how are users interacting with my service versus is my service up and available and performant, right? Where are they getting lost along the way? What errors are they seeing? Where do things drop off? And it's a lot of the same data. So I think being able to connect that back and forth to is important. Similarly, like, the business is also about doing something that's profitable and performant, right? And so efficient. So as organizations look to move to the cloud, they look to move to other places. Like, a lot of the data that we have tells you, a user transaction happened. How much did that transaction cost you? It's not just, there's a lot of tools out there today that I think will tell you, well, let me help you optimize your cloud bill.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Like, that is a thing you should do. But if you do that in isolation of performance and availability and the user experience and all the other pieces, you're likely missing something. And so you can do those local optimizations, but I think there's like a global optimization that can be done. And so that's another angle of, I think, connecting it back to the business. That's maybe not the sales and product experience side of it, but it is a key part of all of our businesses is that accounting team. How do we keep the CFO happy, right?
Right.
How do we keep the CEO happy? And so I want to bring, I think it's important that we break down more of those silos and get into, bring more parts of our organizations in. It's not, I hope that we don't get to the point of, it's being dev, sec, biz, QA, whatever ops, but like the reality is that's what we're all striving to, is having strong alignment across our organizations. And so security and business, I think, are two good silos to go after next.
Yeah, maybe it's just biz ops, the whole business, right?
Yeah, turns out.
Yeah, it turns out it's kind of important to be, cover all the bases. I think you touch on two really big issues, and from being in the field, I'll tell you that those are the hot button issues for most companies we talk to. Security obviously is a really big one, and SolarWinds has really accelerated that piece of it. But I'll tell you, the billing piece of it on cloud is such a big challenge for organizations. And, if you integrate sort of the value of the different components, and you have the visibility into seeing what the customer is valuing, and you can translate that into, here's how much it's costing us, and, we could maybe do it more efficiently or maybe not, but it's something we should maybe double down on. I think that has tremendous value. That sounds really exciting to me.
And so take a look at, and imagine connecting, this is where I think all of the different data points that we have are huge. We know we have an inventory of your cloud assets. We have, from our profiling options, I can tell you how long the function took and why that method or a method took, and like where there's room for optimizing that at a code level. From a user experience perspective, I can tell you how latent their transaction was. And so I don't know, this is all thinking to the future, right? And forward-looking statements and all that. But I think these are, I think that's the vision, is how do we connect all the dots between these different components.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. I think that's really cool stuff.
There's a couple of things I'll send you all links for your show notes and what have you. But one of the things that I love that we do here is we put out two sets of reports recently on the state of serverless and the state of containers and orchestration, and how we're seeing our customers adopt them and the trends that they're taking. Mm-hmm. So I think those came out, just over the last couple of months that, would be fantastic to share with your audience. And so maybe we can come back and talk about those someday.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and anytime you want to come back and talk about those, we're ready to have you. I really appreciate you being on. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and letting us get a glimpse into where you guys are headed. And I wish you guys all the luck in the future. You always, like I said, you guys always seem like you're having a really good time when I see you guys at the show. So I think from a cultural perspective, you got something cool going there, and, more success to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on, Chris and Sandesh. It's been a blast.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, please click that like button. Hit that subscribe button, because that helps the channel tremendously. And if you want to get notified when we post new content, click on that bell icon and you will get those notifications. And I will see you in the next video.